This is the second part of a demonstration where I turn this ugly calendar cover into something nice and meaningful. You can simply watch this as it is, or if you'd like to know how to do it yourself, I recommend you watch part 1. Here you see the cover in its finished form. As you see, it's quite impressionistic and not paying attention to detail. I plan to do a bigger painting of this source photo later anyway. There's a story of this photo in part 1. For many other reasons too, watching part 1 might be wise. Here you see the underpainting, or the blocking state I've reached. Welcome to part 2. You find a more comprehensive list of materials in part 1, it's worth watching. But first of all, I have the completely dry underpainting done in acrylics. An underpainting is not necessary, nor does it have to be done in acrylics. You can do everything in oils in one sitting. What you do have to have is a gesso layer. Because of the grooves in the cover, I preferred to have an extra paint layer. In this phase you might need some variation in your brush types. I didn't use all these colors for this, I just had them on the palette because I tend to work with many paintings at one time. There were a couple of spots where I needed this medium, otherwise it was mostly paint out of the tube. As you see, I use water mixable oil colors. The calendar is smaller than an A4 paper, and I can't be certain yet whether the paint will stick permanently. I'll have to carry the calendar, among other things, and there will be scrubbing. That's the main reason I didn't want to go very detailed with this artwork. Besides, I love Impressionism as it is, and I think it fits portrayal of memories. Now in part 1 I already explained why the clothing is different from the photo. How this is not only a memory but also a wish. I told the story and motivation behind this. As you can see, lots of reasons to see part 1. I won't be talking and explaining much during this part, since a lot of the principles of color decisions and making marks I have already covered before. I will come in at certain points to explain, and now let you watch this with some nice accompanying music. Always feel free to ask in comments below, I'll answer as quick as I can. As of this moment, I'm sorry that my one camera setup doesn't allow me to show the mixing of colors. As this whole thing is sped up 4 times, it wouldn't really serve anyone anyway. But if you'd be interested to see shorter tutorial type of videos, I'm sure it can be arranged to have views of both the mixing and the painting. Leave a comment below if that sounds like something you're interested in. Okay, so sorry to disturb you, but you've seen me so far having started from the background, from the sky and the background mountains, the sea and so on, and I've come forward. This is one very common method. Many prefer to use this in all their painting, and I also very often use it. But it's not the only way to approach this, and there are no rules, regulations that you must follow. I hate rules when I do paintings. I want to be free and vary. It's something I love to do, so I want to be free. It's kind of useful to start from the background because you have the drier surface below, and you can rest your hand if you need to on that, especially when I'm starting to do the face part and the more detailed parts in this one, so it's easier to sometimes rest my hand on the surface. But it's not necessary, as you will see here when I'm doing. I'm just jumping all over the place. At one point I'm painting something on the left side and suddenly I'm switching to the right side. It may seem like completely illogical, and sometimes it is actually. I see something that catches my attention and I wanted to do it straight away. Then I might move to another part of the painting, and it's completely fine. This bouncy method that you are seeing me follow here has also everything to do with not being afraid of what you do when you are painting. It's a very flexible medium. You can correct your mistakes at any given point. You can add to something, you can take something away. You don't have to be afraid that if you make a wrong mark and it looks silly, you can paint over it. You can just paint anything over if you want to. So it's very forgiving and very easy. And that's one of the reasons why I'm bouncing from place to place, correcting something somewhere. I just see something that I can do better, or I can improve upon. So I go back and I correct it. And that leads me to another very important aspect about painting. I'm certain that anyone can do these paintings. Anyone can produce excellent looking, fine pieces of art if they just want to, and if they want to put the time to it. You may be one of those people who have been told when they were a child that you really can't draw, or you have no artistic talent. I hope you haven't been told that, but you may have told yourself, you may have compared to others, other children, and you may have drawn your conclusions, and how wrong those conclusions are when it comes to painting. I'm so convinced that this is one of the most democratic and equal hobbies you could have, because you can learn to be really good, even though you didn't display very much talent, as they call, early on. It might take you more time than for somebody else, but I'm certain that anyone can learn these skills to produce paintings that they aim for. Here I'm starting to correct the proportions of the head and hair, and while doing that I also want to warm the forest areas behind me just a little bit, because the distance from this closer fjord to the background fjord is about 2 kilometers, and there's a lot of humidity in the air that day. That means that there has to be a change in the tones from this warmer color to the colder ones. So that is what I'm trying to achieve here. And as you can see, all my brush work is very rough and only suggestive. So I'm not trying to make any detailed markings here. Even the brush I've chosen here is quite big, so it's really impossible to get fine markings out of it. But I like the style. The whole painting is quite uniform in that sense, that it's in this loose style, quite impressionistic here. Now with the face, the same thing happens as in part 1, that I'm revisiting it many times. You see me go do something else in between, and then I just come back, and it ends up that I have a quite thick layer of paint. It's very alla prima, meaning everything is done in one sitting, and the paint layers almost become problematic at some point because there's so much paint. It's kind of hard to model it the way I want. Remember what I said before, how painting is quite forgiving and you don't have to be afraid of these mistakes. So watch what I'm doing now. You see these thick layers, these almost like blobs of paint I'm putting on there, and also how funny, elongated the jaw is. Everything is out of proportion. I surely would have been horrified in the beginning stages of my painting career, if you will, to be doing something like this. I would have thought, oh, this is ruined, I cannot save this anyhow. But that's not true. As you can see if you keep watching, it takes some time. I have to make modifications. I add paint there and then I delete it from somewhere else, and I push and pull the paint until I find the right places. And in the end, I'm completely satisfied at the level of detail I've reached. I decided to brighten the tone of the orange in my shirt quite a bit. And as you can see, I'm not painting very much detail at all. There are some folds and you can see some shadows and such, but it could have been done way more detailed. This is the amount I was striving, and I want the image to be quite uniform. I don't want some part to be more detailed than the others. I decided to warm up the rocks quite a bit. I made a mix of raw sienna and burnt sienna and burnt umber, and I think there was a bit of yellow ochre, and I just kind of glazed over. Here is where I used the medium also, so you see everything is kind of transparent. You see the tones showing through from underneath, but I kind of overdid it, so that caused me to have to revisit this after it was dry for a third sitting, and it took some hour or something like that to get the tones correct. So I was a bit mad at myself because I overdid it here. The tones should have been way more muted than they are now. So that's one thing I had to revisit. this is 2 days after the previous warmer tones. They have kind of dried at this point, and I wanted to get the highlights correct. That's what you see me do in the upper right corner now. There wasn't a direct sunlight, but anyway, the light was hitting from the upper right corner, so I wanted to make it more clear that those planes will have to be lighter, and I needed to do that all over this rocky area here. And also I started to take down the 2 warm tones and to introduce the proper tones to the rocks. You also see me adding some darker tones, and they are cooler ones. Here on the right side you see how I'm using a mixture of, let me see, I have to check what this color was. Okay, so it's primary magenta and burnt umber and ultramarine blue mostly. There might be something else in the mix, and of course titanium white a bit. But this mixture is what I'm using for the darker shadow parts underneath the rocks and to the left of everything. At the same time, I'm also detailing the rocks quite a lot more, especially on the left side, lower left side. Already in part 1, I made the decision not to be very faithful to the photo when it comes to this rock formation in the foreground. There is the rotten tooth, as I call it, and you can see its basic lines they are quite as they should be, but there's a lot of detail that I just took from my own imagination, and I didn't care to look at the photo. I just let the brush go. Okay, so this rough, coarse, little impressionistic painting is my remodeled cover for this calendar. As you can see, this is the kind of surface that we started with a lot of sheen and these creases and quite unpleasant color in my view. So, how long did it take to make this kind of cover? First we did the gessoing, and it took less than half an hour. Of course, to let it dry, it takes under a day. Then I prepared the drawing, and it was about 15 minutes. And then we had this underpainting part done in acrylics here. It took me 2 hours to do it. Then the actual painting in this part 2 with oil paints took me 3 hours. 2 hours until the too warm colors mistake. And then after that there was this 1 hour for calming down, cooling down the colors a bit.